welcome back to Mika Reacting Reviews, reacting to things on the internet. And today we're returning to Dr. Peterson and Ben Shapiro. We're going to continue their little coffee table talk that I uploaded a couple of days ago, or like last week, which I actually really like that setup of that casual, just chatting philosophy, some intellect over a nice cup of joe or lunch or something like that. FYI, I actually already recorded this video, and so for some reason the first half of it, not the first half of it, like the first few minutes of it got deleted. And so at some point I will magically change outfits and be a completely different day. So the beginning of this is going to be today. Most of this video is going to be what I recorded a few days ago, so just FYI. But anyway, we're getting right into it. Before you do, if you like this type of videos, please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell to get notifications when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. In order to support the channel even further, you can donate. My PayPal link is in the description box below and also in the comment section. Of course it helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, subscribe. And another great way to support the channel is you either join my brand new membership program, different levels, different tiers, different perks, or you can visit my brand new merch shop. Other than that, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. All right, here you go.
This is why, I mean, it's funny because I think that, you know, the issue that you started to become really politically prominent on, which is the Bill C-16 in Ontario and
Canada, it was federal law.
In Canada, the gender issue.
Yeah.
You know, that's the issue where now the question that's constantly being asked, so why do you even care? Why do you even pay attention? And the answer is because...
I was asked that earlier today.
Oh, really? What did you say?
I'm not letting the cat have my tongue.
Yeah.
It's like it has nothing to do with gender as far as I'm concerned, or that's peripheral in some sense. So the accusation, why do you care? Fair enough. It's like, you know, in some way, people can go to hell in a handbasket if they're inclined to. Mm-hmm. Now, I would rather have that not happen, but people are, what would you say, doomed to their own autonomy. But I'm not saying words that other people want me to say. And the idea of compelled speech, it's like, the bill was this much about gender.
Right.
And it was this much about,
right.
Oh yeah, the government's going to tell me what to say, hey. But now they're regulating what therapists can say, therapy sessions.
This is interesting because to me, the problem with a lot of this is less a free speech issue, even though I'm on the same page with you. Mm-hmm. And to me, it really is a fundamental truth issue. Meaning that, yeah, you're trying to force me to say something I don't want to say. Mm-hmm. But to me, the fact that what you're trying to force me to say is so innately opposed to the good is the problem. Like you could try. I would have objections to you forcing me to say that I like a particular movie, right? Mm-hmm. It may not be true. I don't like the particular movie. It would be bad if you tried to force me to say that. But the level of passion that I have for issues like this one really go to the fact that I think the fundamental good of humanity relies on basic acknowledgments of biological truth, especially when it comes to gender. Mm-hmm. And anybody who's ever dealt with children, I find myself getting, you know, if I look at my own political evolution, I would say that when I grew up in a religious home, so that means that pretty conservative. And then you go to college and you're living by yourself and you're not married, you don't have kids. You tend to become a little bit more libertarian, which is like, okay, you know, let everybody do whatever they're going to do and it's not going to bother me. And then you have kids and you realize that there's a pool in which we are all swimming. And that pool is going to define...
Virginia.
Exactly. Like my kid, it's going to determine how my kid lives. And I want my community to reflect some of my values because I don't want my kid to live in the toxic sludge that you are creating for my kid. I don't want you indoctrinating my kids in bullshit about whether...
Yes.
All right, stopping it there. Okay, so for me, Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro kind of come to different points when it comes to the BC-16. I believe that's the name of the Canadian bill that forces speech. I feel like Dr. Jordan Peterson came from it very much of a, you cannot force me to say something I don't want to see. There's one thing when it comes to censorship of saying I can't say this because of, you know, it incites violence or whatever. There's another thing to force me to say something and under the disguise of empathy or compassion, what it really is, so you can have more control over me and my freedom as a person. And I think Ben Shapiro comes from a different end of like, from what I've heard of Ben Shapiro in the past, like he does believe, I think, that gender dysphoria exists. He sees it as a mental disorder that should be taken care of by a therapist or psychologist, and that letting someone to live in their delusion of being a different gender or sex, that is actually bad and unhealthy for that person and society, it's a system and culture as a whole. Where I think Dr. Peterson just has more of an issue with the compelled speech. I'm more with Dr. Peterson here when it comes to the bill. For me, I do believe transgenderism, or people are actually trans. I do believe that is a real thing. People do suffer from gender dysphoria. However, if you look at the data, if you look at the studies, I believe around 70% of people who experience gender dysphoria as children usually grow out of it as they reach the end of adolescence and early young adulthood. So actually physically transitioning isn't the cure-all to be all for everyone who experiences gender dysphoria, because a lot of people who experience it grow out of it and they will usually end up just being a gay man or a gay woman. So I'm on the side of Ben Shapiro when it comes to children, because like even as adults, if adults grow out of it and can then for regret transitioning because it was something they would have grown out of it anyway, if adults can make that decision and not be right about it, and you're allowing young children to make that decision, I just think that's the wrong thing to do. And even if someone doesn't grow out of gender dysphoria and they have it for the rest of their life, transitioning is still not the cure all to be all. People who can still experience gender dysphoria even after they physically transition or even medically transition. You can still experience gender dysphoria. That's why a lot of people talk about the suicide rate being so high in the transgender community. A lot of times they put it on society. Well, if society wasn't so transphobic and they had more rights and stuff like that. I'm not saying that has nothing to do with it, but some of it is to do with mental health issues. They still suffer from mental health issues even after they transition. So physically or medically transitioning isn't not the cure to be all to transgenderism or gender dysphoria, and that's for adults. So you're allowing this for children is in a case that they may not even be trans because they may be too young to even be able to verbally express what they're actually feeling. When Ben Shapiro talked about how like you can't even speak about factual issue when it comes to biology, when you can't simply say there's differences between men and women. There are biologically men and women, and these are the biological sexes. When you literally just can't say that because that's now offensive, that's ridiculous, because that is a biological fact. I understand what he means, where I want my children my community to reflect my beliefs and my values for my children. That's what you do when you move into certain communities. Like the entire society doesn't have to reflect your beliefs and your values, but most people move into communities that do reflect their beliefs and their values. That's why a lot of Jewish people live in Jewish communities, Hispanic people live in Hispanic communities, Irish people live in Irish communities, because they want their community to reflect their beliefs and their values. But that doesn't mean the entire society needs to reflect your beliefs and your values. Now, I do think there needs to be some social agreements that we all agree to, so we can have a well-running machine when it comes to society as a whole. But I don't think everybody in the entire country needs to bend to your ideology or your belief system. So you have the freedom to move around, so you can move into the communities and cultures and that you want to, that reflects your beliefs and your values. Okay, I know I'm repeating myself. I apologize. I'm just trying to like get my thoughts out. I'm also with Dr. Peterson, where I believe that the powers to be, the government, the institutions, these groups, these activists, use communities and use the idea of sympathy and empathy to implement more power. So like he said, like the bill had very little to do with transgenderism or the trans community, and had way more to do with the government taking more power, but they hide under this community to try to usher in that power, and people really need to pay attention to those things. I'm also with Dr. Peterson, where I'm more of a libertarian, where it's like, yeah, I don't want people to destroy their lives, but people should have the freedom to do whatever the fuck they want. If that means destroying your own personal life, then that is your choice to do so. But I guess when it comes to problem, if you destroy your life, destroys the community, or destroys the society, or destroys the culture, you know what I mean? So I think that's when like the balancing is. It's the kind of thing with like fat positivity. It's like, I don't care if you're fat, but if you are teaching young kids in the next generation that is healthy to be obese, that is when it becomes a problem. So your personal decisions to be unhealthy is one thing, but your decision to try to influence the next generation is another thing. I hope that wasn't too long-winded. We will continue now.
Exactly.
A boy can be a
People
girl, a girl can
people
be a
will
boy.
say, well, I'll exceed, but not for my children.
Yeah.
And that's what Virginia demonstrated. It's like, you can come after me, but you come after my kids, and that's a whole different story.
It's so fundamentally opposed to everything true, and the fact that and that's the insistence. The insistence isn't that people be treated humanely or be treated decently. The insistence is that your vision of yourself be reflected by me in defiance of baseline reality and in order to redefine how society as a whole works.
Well, a lot of it's murky thinking. You know, if someone asked me, do I believe that there are gender fluid people? I would say yes. And I would say a young man who's gender fluid, I know what he's like temperamentally. He's high in agreeableness. He's high in neuroticism. So he has a feminine temperament. He's more interested in people than things. And he's extremely high in openness. And so his temperament is fluid. He's creative, and so he's one thing one day and one thing the next. And his fundamental temperament is tilted towards the feminine. But that doesn't mean he's not a man.
Right, exactly.
So
exactly.
So it's murky thinking. So
that's exactly right.
It's certainly the case that 1 out of 10 women, now it depends on where you put the cutoff, say, but you could say with reasonable certainty that 1 in 10 women has a masculine temperament and 1 in 10 men has a feminine temperament. And so that's a lot of people. And those people, especially if they're also creative, well, they're kind of at a loss in relationship to what to do with their identity, because they're pulled. First of all, they have a hard time catalyzing their identity. Creative people have a hard time catalyzing it. It's like the definition of creativity. They're protean. And so there have been people who play at the edges of gender identity forever. And fair enough. And sometimes that's even admirable if it's done in a sophisticated way. And it's charismatic. So you see it in Mick Jagger, you see it in David Bowie, you see it in people like Madonna as well, because Madonna had a hard edge, that was very masculine. And all the Marvel superhero women have a hard masculine edge. And so we find that charismatic because those people are also integrated. But the notion that there's such a thing as gender, that's not right. There's variability in personality and temperament. And the idea that there's no such thing as biological sex, that's just insane.
It's insanity.
Okay, so I totally agree with that. And I like that Dr. Jordan Peterson hit on the sort of creative, that there are people who are fluid, and there are people who just live in the middle and live in the gray area. It doesn't mean they don't fit any of the generalities when it comes to biological sex or men or women, but they're more fluid in a way. And for me, I feel like I fit that, not when it comes to like gender or sex. Like, I'm very much a woman. Maybe I have some sort of masculine traits. Like, I'm very stoic. I'm very ambitious. I have a lot of perseverance. I agree a lot of my guy friends. That's why even on this channel, I'm more in tune with the men's rights side of things. So in a lot of ways, I do have more of a masculine trait, but I am also can be very feminine and soft, especially when I'm in romantic heterosexual relationships. I very much take on that femininity. So I am a bit fluid in that way. But when it comes to more fluidity, I am more fluid when it comes to lifestyle. Like, I am a creative, I'm an artist, I'm a hippie. I don't really fit into these black and white binaries when it comes to lifestyles or traditional ways of living. That to me is just like, and boring. Like, I just like more of a fluid lifestyle, because that I've never fit into that binary ever since I was like little, and I always thought it was weird and strange and all these things. I don't fit into those binaries. However, that doesn't mean I don't have any personality traits that fits into the gender the biological gender stereotypes and stuff like that. Like, especially when I was growing up, I was a tomboy, and it's scary to think if I somehow was magically born in Canada, later on in the years when this trans thing was so popular, that me being a tomboy would have prompted my parents in thinking I was a boy, or you know what I mean, or me having some attraction to women would prompted people thinking that I was a boy. It's like, no, I'm still a woman. I just have certain traits that are more fluid, and so I think is very, very dangerous. The idea of like just because a boy has more feminine traits or just because a girl has more masculine traits does not mean that person is a different sex or a different gender or whatsoever, actually. And I think that's why I'm against the whole idea of allowing children to decide their sex and gender at such a young age, because it's like they might just be a girl who's more boyish and there might be a boy who's just more girly. There's nothing wrong with those things. And then people would even argue this sort of trans trend is actually making people more homophobic. It's like they're erasing lesbianism. It's like you're just a gay woman. It doesn't mean that you are a boy or a man. You know what I mean? It's okay just to be gay. It's so like I totally agree with that. And I like also what Ben was saying in the beginning. It reminds me of something that I heard from PragerU, where they were saying it went from, I feel like with the progressive or even with the LGBTQ plus, it went from be tolerant of us, leave us alone and let us live our life, to you need to celebrate what we feel, or you need to celebrate our lifestyles just as much as we do. It went from tolerate and understanding to you need to embrace it too. You need to be just as in it as we are. And it's like, no, like all I owe you is to leave you alone and not to harm you and let you live your life. I don't owe having to dive deep into your pronouns and deep into your understanding and deep into your lived experience to turn my whole life over to understand what you're going through. And I feel like that's what they want. They want, not only for you to understand it and leave them alone, they want you to embrace it and celebrate it just as much as they do. If someone doesn't understand you but they're not bothering you, leave them alone. If they don't understand your pronouns but they're not bothering you, leave them alone. If they don't understand how you're trans but they're not bothering you, leave them alone. Stop trying to force people to understand where you're coming from. You know what I mean? Anyway, let's continue.
They've abstracted gender from sex and then read gender back into sex as more important than sex. It's
well, and then why insist upon the biological modifications?
Right.
If there's no such thing as sex, it's like, well, what? Then just act out your role.
Right.
Leave your body alone because it's irrelevant anyways. Well, it turns out it's not irrelevant. You have to go through the surgical transformation.
I mean, to play devil's advocate, I think the argument on that side is you're only thinking I'm transitioning into a woman because society has said that these are female traits. Like, I can still be a man and have boobs, as they call the male vagina, that is the penis. It can also be female. The only reason why you think it's a male penis is because society told you it's a male penis. It can also just be a female penis or a male vagina. So they basically say that anything that's been labeled men or women has nothing to do with biology. It has everything to do with societal programming. So they're not transitioning. They're just living in a body that they want. But the only reason why you think it's a woman body or a female body is because society told you it's a female body. And the only reason why you think they're transitioning to a male body because society told you it's a male body. It's just another body. And so that is the argument that they would use against that, is that we're not transitioning, we're just living in a body that we want, but my penis is still a vagina, or my vagina is still a penis, or whatever they want to call it. So that is the argument against that, just FYI, but let's continue.
Which is a pretty dramatic answer to a question that for 99% of people who are ambivalent about their gender identity would be best solved without surgical intervention.
Yep.
And then so now in Canada, because they banned conversion therapy, it's now all affirmation therapy.
Right.
There's no such thing as affirmation therapy.
Right. No, it's insane. I mean, the semantic game that was used in order to say, well, conversion therapy, which was at one time using electric shock to treat homosexuals, and saying that that's the same thing as you have a gender-confused 12-year-old.
Look, I had a 14-year-old kid who was a client of mine, and he was in the mid stages of puberty. He was a pretty creative kid, agreeable kid as well, right? And that's important. So he had a bit of a feminine temperament. That also meant he could be pushed around fairly easily. Well, there was an aggressively gay guy in his school. Was hitting on him and trying to convince him that he was gay. Well, he didn't know. So he wanted to talk to me about it. It's like, well, I was going to tell him. What the hell do I know about this kid?
Exactly.
And I wanted to hear what his problems were and how it might be sorted out, what he wanted. And that's what you do in therapy, is you help people sort out their problems. Now this idea is you come to me with an axiomatic claim, whatever it is about your identity, and my job is to rubber stamp it. It's like, I'm not a therapist then. So this is not only insane, this insistence, like I like to think of truth, untruth, and anti-truth, right? And the notion that therapists affirm is an anti-truth, because look, let's say you come to me and you say, you have a proposition about yourself, and I say, no, I'm your therapist. No, that's wrong. It's like, that's not good therapy. But neither is you have a proposition about yourself and you're disturbed enough to come to a therapeutic session, and I say, yes, you're right. It's like, I don't know if you're right. And if you're so right, why are you here? Like, what are we talking about if you're already right?
It's a destruction of basically the only form of therapy that we know to work.
Yes,
cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
It's all about saying that
so are the rest of them. They're all this is one of the things that's interesting about clinical psychology. Every single school of psychotherapy is predicated on the idea that free expression of thought or the free transmutation of behavior is curative. And it's true with cognitive behavioral therapy, just like psychoanalytic therapy. It's all the same thing. And also the other axiom of therapy is voluntarily expose yourself in measured doses to what you're afraid of. And so that's an interesting thing, because the psychoanalysts believed when the behaviorists first came up with exposure therapy, they had it formulated wrong. They thought you learn to be afraid. So you're normal, and then something hurts you, and then you learn to be afraid of it. That's wrong. You're always afraid, except when you learn not to. So they had it exactly backwards neuropharmacologically, and it really matters. This matters. That doesn't mean you can't learn some fears. You can, but mostly you unlearn terror. Right? So children are afraid to get away from their mother. It's because they're afraid of the entire world. Well, you have to learn how not to be, and you don't learn that by habituation, because that was the idea. So you take someone who's afraid, they've been conditioned to be afraid, you expose them to what they're afraid of, and then you have them do relaxation exercises so they counter condition. Well, then it was discovered, and they don't have to do the relaxation exercises. It's like, oh, well, it still works, just exposure. It's like, well, they get less afraid when you expose them, because their fear habituates. So then the psychoanalyst said, well, if they get less afraid of that particular thing, the symptoms are just going to substitute, because that fear of an elevator, say, was reflective of a deeper fear of death. I had a client I exposed to an elevator, the doors open, she said, that's a tube. It's like, and her fantasy about the elevator was, it was a place she was going to die in of a heart attack. Well, people were discomforted and, what would you say, made contemptuous of her foolishness while she was suffering and dying. So social alienation and death, that was the elevator for her. So we expose her to the elevator. What does she learn? Not to be afraid of the elevator. No. She learns she can tolerate those fears. She learns to be brave. And so the psychoanalysts were they were diametrically wrong, because if you expose someone to anything they're afraid of, effectively they get less afraid of everything, right? And so that's partly why psychotherapy is curative in that manner, is that people discover that they're bigger than their fears. They don't discover that the fears are trivial.
Wow, I honestly just learned something new, because I've exposure therapy is something that I've heard of, and I honestly did think that made sense, that fear is learned. And he did say there are some fears that are learned, like you can learn fears through your parents. If your parents tell you that airplanes are terrible and they're terrifying, then maybe as you grow up you learn how to fear flying. But the idea that the fear is always there, and that the fear is, matter of fact, just something, it's not the root cause of the fear, it's just a symptom of something that's actually deeper, like the fear of death, or the fear of, like what she said, like social anxiety or something like that. That's actually, I think, way better to learn that the fear is actually a symptom of something deeper, and you should work on that deeper belief system instead of just this sort of constant exposure. And then I also like the idea of the fear wasn't trivial, because again, it's the symptom of something maybe deeper, but you actually just learn how to be more braver, and I think that's actually more commendable. But also the affirming therapy is something that I totally disagree with. Affirming therapy is just like a coddle session. It's just like an echo chamber of someone telling you yes, you're right, like why, and I also if you already believe that you're right, then what is the point of going to a therapist? You just want someone to stroke your ego ego or something like that. But affirmative therapy, when it comes to transgenderism, especially with children, is actually quite dangerous, because like instead of the therapist actually seeing the child and seeing that maybe you have something else going on, maybe you have some other personality disorder, maybe you have anxiety, maybe you're depressed, maybe you're being abused at home and this is causing this. Like instead of seeing if there's something else going on, they just let the person say, I'm a man or I'm a woman, this is how I feel, and they go, yep, I affirm you, and then they give them the chemicals and the pills and, you know, just usher them off into surgery eventually. And so I think that's quite dangerous, and doctors have, and therapists and psychologists have come out and spoke against this and said, we feel like our hands are tied. If we speak out against this, we're going to be called transphobic, and we just have to like let these kids do what they're doing. There was one documentary that came out with this older trans woman who was detransitioning, and he detransitioned, so I can say he now. And so he was like, I never wanted to be a woman, and this is something I never needed to do. I had other personality disorders that was actually going on, and when they actually went back and confronted the therapist actually confirmed to him that, yeah, you had other personality disorders going on. I couldn't tell you that because we are practicing affirmative therapy. The therapists who are prescribing these children and say, giving them the green light, have been told just to affirm, just to say they're right, and not to question anything. And I think that's quite dangerous, and I think maybe parents don't even know that and need to realize that. But anyway, I think this whole conversation is really interesting because I just learned something new about the whole exposure therapy thing. But let's continue.
I think that the cult of authenticity is going to be the destruction of all psychotherapy, and then because if the cult of authenticity is that your true authentic feelings are what makes you you, then the attempt to make you brave in spite of your fears is a suppression of your fears. It's almost like a Freudian analysis of you're suppressing your sexual desire, and this is not full authenticity.
Yeah, right. Why isn't the fear you?
Right, exactly.
The authentic you.
Exactly, and I think that that's kind of where we're going. It seems like
yeah. Well, so this movement towards unity that we were talking about, this is a place I think where, like, informed liberals and conservatives could meet. It's like, well, there is this authenticity, let's say, and drive for adventure, and you see that elevated to the highest place in some sense in the more careless Disney movies. But the full manifestation of that in an integrated sense is the drive towards authenticity inside this higher order unity. It has to be, because otherwise it's disuniting. It causes fragmentation and chaos. And so it has to be subordinate to a higher order end. And then you might say, well, what is that? Part of that's the reciprocal altruism that the evolutionary biologists are always on about. It's like, some for you, some for me, some for you, some for me, in measure, right? And that makes both of us richer. And so that's part of the higher order unity, and people are intensely reciprocally altruistic. So it's authenticity in the service of what? Now, when Pinocchio becomes real, he's already rescued his father, right? So he's established an accord with the tradition that gave birth to him already. He's revitalized that. So when he wakes up, he's not free. He doesn't have any strings on him anymore, but he's already existing in a harmonious relationship with his father, which is a big deal. And one of the lovely things about what happens to me as a consequence of my lectures is that lots of fathers and sons come up to me and say, we've really worked out our relationship. It's like, and they're both like, you've never seen smiles like that. It's really something to be stopped on the street and to be told that. To see people so joyful about that, because it's their heart desire, you know. And that's that integration of that drive to autonomy with the family, with the father, with the mother, with the broader community. All that has to be in a higher order unity.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
that's the conservative insistence, right?
Exactly. Is that there are the wall, as you said before, the walls have to exist. You can have autonomy, but the autonomy has to exist within the walls. And then once you let the autonomy or the rationalism destroy all the walls,
well, there's no autonomy without the walls. There's just chaos.
Okay, so yeah, the sort of existing in the autonomy of hierarchy or whatever, I would have to like hear more of that to really get a complete grasp on it. But I agree that there has to be some sort of structure. There has to be a foundation so you can thrive. So can it be complete chaos? I think the problem is when those structures and the walls become too confining for people like me, like you talked about earlier, creatives and sort of more free spirits and stuff like that who don't want to necessarily live in confinement. But there has to be some sort of structure, some foundation. I actually think children thrive better and more, even if they're creative children, when there is a foundation, when there is a structure. When children have no stability as they're growing up, they feel unsafe, therefore they won't actually feel free enough to open up and thrive and become who they should be. And the whole authenticity of being genuine. I think one of the authenticities of oneself is actually trying to figure out who you are. And I think what's going on with my generation and the younger generation is like, instead of actually going out and living life and achieving things and building things for yourself and having conversations, having relationships, and through that you figure out who you are, I think they're just trying to like get it the really quick and easy way by just slapping labels on themselves and slapping identities on themselves, but without actually having any real life experiences, without having to go through the shit and go through the turbulence and go through the ups and downs. They just want to have an instant, this is who I am, my authentic self, this is who I am, but they don't actually know who they are because they just ran to a group and slapped a bunch of labels on themselves without actually, living life and figuring it out. And that's how I think we should do it. Back in the day, like Viking days, you sent your son out to the woods to wrestle a bear, and through that turmoil, through that hardship, they figure out who they are. And so I feel like a lot of younger generation, my generation, they just want it easy, and I don't think that's how you get it. Anyway, guys, I know this video was long. I really wanted to keep it shorter, but I love Dr. Jordan Peterson and I love these conversations, and I'm going to definitely say my piece. I know you'd rather hear him talk, but hopefully you enjoy this video. Also, tell me what you think in the comment section below, what they said, what I said. Let me know in the comment section below. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell to get to notifications when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, you can donate. My PayPal link is in the description box below and also in the comment section. Of course, it helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, subscribe. Another great way to support this channel is you can join my brand new membership program, different levels, different tiers, different perks, or you can visit my brand new merch shop. Great statement tees and mugs to show the world what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and type of music you're into. I also have a second travel vlog channel. I travel as a lifestyle, I live abroad. If you'd like to know where I am in the world, you can go to the description box below and also in the comment section. Hit the link, go subscribe to my travel vlog channel, and or follow me on my travel Instagram. My stories is usually what's supposed to date. I also have a TikTok, links down below. You guys have an amazing day. Bye!